Is there a way you think I'll ever be able to burn belly fat for good?
There's a component, of course, with genetics. Now, with that said, we know that the leading science right now and what's really beginning to finally explode and become a popular part of the lexicon is epigenetics.
Yes.
And things that are above genetic control. Now, with that said, I think the first thing is having a understanding and an association with what fat actually is. And most folks have no idea. Unfortunately, we're at war with something we don't even understand. And so fat can be broken down into essentially 5 different categories at minimum. And a couple of these folks might have heard before, but we're gonna go even deeper. So the first type is subcutaneous fat. And subcutaneous fat is a type of white adipose tissue. This is the fat that's just below your skin. And so if you think about like fat on your arms or your thighs, your butt, you can also have some subcutaneous fat on your belly, but that's the stuff you can pinch. Now,
I can pinch a lot right here.
the other type of fat is visceral fat. And it's also known as omentum fat. And omentum fat is the kind of deeper recesses of your abdominal cavity, right? So this is the fat that's really kind of around the organs, kind of if you have a lot of visceral fat, putting stress on your pancreas and on your kidneys and just everything in your core.
This is the fat inside your not on the outside of your muscles, but inside your body.
Yeah, so it's like your abdominal cavity.
Gotcha. Your visceral fat, and you want less of that.
Yeah, this is the most dangerous type of fat. This is the fat that's most correlated with heart disease, with Alzheimer's, with type 2 diabetes. It's just putting stress on your core, everything, which there's so much around there.
Digestive tract, your organs,
Yes.
your liver, your stomach, everything.
And this is the stuff, it's a little bit more firm to the touch. It's a little bit harder to get your hands around. And so these are both still 2 types of white adipose tissue. These are storage fats. Okay, so your body's storing energy. And before I go on, let me preface by saying this. Our fat is actually amazing. It's one of the most important things that have made us the humans that we are today, is our ability to store energy and to go back and utilize that energy. Our fat is programmed to do what we've taught it to do. It's just doing what it's programmed to do. It's very good at it though. And it can be a little bit clingy, so you have to give the right messages, and that's part of the issue. So I just want to make that clear. And fat is also, we tend to think it's like scattered droplets of cells or unhappiness throughout our body, but it's really an organ itself. So
Fat is an organ.
It's an organ. It's an organ that has this interconnected communication. And being that it's an organ, it produces its own hormones. All right, so it's like producing more hormones that encourage more fat storage if it gets out of hand. All right, so I want to preface by saying that.
Wait, is it an organ or is it like an organ?
It's an organ.
Fat is an organ.
Yes.
And
just like, for example.
So fat in our body is one organ and it's all connected. From the brain
connected.
From the fat in my brain to my belly to my toe.
Now there's different types of fat communities. Okay. All right. So this is another conversation. I go through all of these. I literally call it the fat communities in Eat Smarter and break this stuff down. So there's another type of fat in the white adipose tissue camp that a lot of people don't know about. It's called intramuscular fat. All right, intramuscular fat.
Is this the third type of fat?
Yeah. And so this type of fat really works on site to provide energy to your muscles. Now, when I went to school, my conventional education, I really was indoctrinated with an idea that fat and muscle are they have this dichotomy, like they're 2 different things, they're separate, but they actually work together. And intramuscular fat really provides, just to think about what it looks like, if you think about the marbling of a steak, all right, that's that's your intramuscular fat. Now that can get out of hand too, and you can get what we refer to as chubby muscles, all right, with the intramuscular fat. So that's too much white adipose tissue storage on that particular fat community, all right? So these 3 are white adipose tissue. These are storage fats. Now here's what's really amazing, and a lot of folks might know about this next one. We also have body fat that burns fat. So they're not storage fats. These are fats that contribute to the burning of energy. The first one that's becoming a lot more recognizable is brown adipose tissue, all right, or BAT, brown adipose tissue, or brown fat. Now, brown fat, the reason that it's brown is that it's so dense in mitochondria, all right?
Which is mitochondria are good, right?
Yeah, mitochondria are really the energy power plants of our cells, really producing the energy. When we talk about having energy, these are the power plants creating that energy. And mitochondria is where your fat actually gets burned, all right? So folks we're taught these like diet paradigms, like how does it work? Where does the fat go? How does it get burned? Your mitochondria actually are the place where the triglycerides get shipped to actually burn them and use them as fat. So brown adipose tissue is brown because it's so dense in mitochondria.
Side note, how do I go to bed weighing a certain amount and then I wake up and I lose 2 pounds? Where does that go? Is that just burned through sweat? Is that just mitochondria burning and it's disintegrating into the air? What is happening?
This is such a great question. So in Eat Smart, this is the first time in book form, we're walking people through how the process of fat loss actually happens. And it's just, the question should be like, where the hell does fat go?
Where does it go?
Does it go to
you just poop it out? Do you sweat it out? Does it?
You've got that.
Do I breathe it in?
You've got that Thanos keychain. Does it go to another dimension? Exactly. You know what I mean? But what they did, and this was so fascinating, they actually tracked the path of fat getting burned throughout the body and tracked how it actually is eliminated. And so what they discovered was that about 84% of the fat, because, okay, we have to preface by saying this. For us psychologically, in our culture, we tend to think of burning fat. If there's a visual of it, it's sweating.
Yeah.
Like we're at the gym, we're sweating it out. That's your fat cells crying, having a good breakup cry, you know? That's what we think.
Yeah.
But in actuality, about 84% of the fat that you lose or that you expel from your body is through breathing.
What?
Yeah, it's eliminated via your lungs. Yeah, it's carbon dioxide.
So no way. So fat
about
burns
84%.
in the body and then it goes into your lungs? It's like transporting through the lung cavity and then you breathe it out?
It's an eliminatory organ, you know? We don't think about that.
What?
We tend to think about like our gastrointestinal tract, our bladder as eliminatory organs, your lungs. And so you breathe about 84% of the fat that you lose comes out via your breath. And about a third of that happens while you're sleeping at night.
So you breathe fat out. That's how you burn it.
Yeah.
How much?
Caesar Milan is the dog whisperer.
Yes.
You're the fat whisperer.
Exactly. I burn it in my sleep. So wait a minute. How much fat do we burn through our lungs?
About 84% of it. So
all of our fat. So if I'm 100 pounds.
But this is not just you're breathing. It's all the metabolic processes that take place to create the metabolic kind of offshoots or
it just
metabolic
comes
waste.
Through the
right,
mouth.
Through the breathing. You also do eliminate some of body fat through fluids. So about, somewhere around the ballpark of about 15%, 16 to 14% sweat,
and
urine,
bathroom.
Tears. All of these things are eliminating
fat
products.
Fat
Yeah.
Is the fat? It looks coagulated when you look at it in your body, right? So how does it break down and then turn into just nothing that you can see?
Yeah, it's a very complex and beautiful process.
The body is fascinating what it can do.
It is. And we go through, and it can be so overwhelming, but what I did was I made it an analogy in the book of a theater, making your body like a cellular movie theater. And there are particular ushers who are there to put fat into the seats. So we tend to think that fat cells, we're trying to, quote, kill fat or burn fat, but that's not really how it works, actually. Your fat cells are storage containers, and what they're getting filled with, the fat cells, basically, when you're born, you have a certain allotment of fat cells, all right? You can't just indiscriminately kill them. They get filled with more and more energy. It makes the fat cell expand. So what we're trying to do is to get the fat cell to let go of its contents so they can be used as fuel.
Right.
All right? And so there are two enzymes that are really the head ushers that push the fat contents or triglycerides into the fat cell, or they usher them out when it's time to leave. So one of its hormone-sensitive lipase is the one that comes and gets folks out of the theater. All right? Lipoprotein lipase takes the triglycerides and ushers them into the theater. All right? And then there's organs that kind of dominate and regulate what those enzymes are doing. Namely your pancreas is like the mother of two brothers who have two different roles. One of them is insulin, and the other one, its brother, is glucagon. All right, insulin is when you think of insulin, what do you think of though?
Eating sugar.
Yeah.
That's what I think of, because insulin spikes in the body when you eat sugar, right?
Yeah, and most folks think of diabetes too. It's like tied into that lexicon.
Of course.
But insulin is so important for our survival. It's a super amazing.
We need it.
Yes, you absolutely have to have insulin. And if you're born, in a condition where you have type 1 diabetes and the beta cells in your pancreas aren't even making insulin, like you can die. Your cells won't get energy. So now here's the thing. Insulin's job is to store energy. All right? Yeah, and to encourage all those enzymes and to do their work as well. So when it's out of hand, when insulin is too active, it can be a problem.
It's storing too much fat.
Yeah, and it can get to a point where there's so much activity with insulin, it's getting overrun and stressed out that it stops doing its job properly. That's where you get insulin resistance, all right? And then you have something called this kind of instant fat cell creation that can take place with the liver. It'll just start making its own fat as well. So, but we'll circle back to that a little bit later.
Yes.
But here's the thing. So you got insulin doing its job of fat storage or energy storage. Glucagon does the opposite. It encourages your cells to let go of their contents to be used as energy. But glucagon cannot do its job unless its brother sits its ass down somewhere and
Insulin.
stops. Yes.
So how do you get insulin to stop doing its job?
That's what it's all about, man. That's what it's all about. But we don't want it to stop. We just want it to be efficient.
Efficient.
And now here's another thing. We do know that, as you mentioned, sugar is a big driver of insulin, carbohydrates in general.
Yeah.
However,
Breads, pastas, right?
yeah, protein does as well. It incites
Really?
the activity of insulin at a lesser degree for sure. And even fat, in a kind of backdoor way, does drive insulin function too, or even contributes to potentially insulin sensitivity or insulin resistance. So it's not just this one thing, but we do know that in our culture, on average, folks are eating like 150 pounds of sugar a year, so that abnormal amount of exposure is chronically creating this overactivity of insulin to the point that we have insulin resistance.
Because
Right?
100 years ago, we weren't eating as much sugar, I'm assuming, in
Yeah.
processed
It's not
foods.
even close. It's not even close.
But what is with the life expectancy increases every year, it seems like. We're eating more and more bad things, but we're able to live longer, whereas before we weren't.
That's the misnomer, though. We're not necessarily living longer. We're dying longer.
We're getting sicker and being able to
being
stay
able
alive.
Yes. It's
interesting.
very different. And this is the first generation. We are the first generation right now that is going to not outlive our generations before us. Right? This is the first time we're seeing this downtick. When we're
do you
supposed to
mean?
be seeing folks, well, basically the life expectancy has gone down for the first time
Really?
in like recent history. Yeah.
So we're saying we're not supposed to outlive our parents? Or what do you mean?
So we'll just say the life expectancy of the past generation was 80 years old. Now it's 79.
Really?
So it's just the life expectancy has gone
Interesting.
down for the first
From the
time.
previous
in
generation,
recent-
got
in
you.
recent history.
It's interesting. I was asking Dr. David Sinclair about this.
I love him.
He was like, the goal is not to live as long as you can and be sick and miserable. He's like, I've seen that in too many people. The goal is to live as long as you can, healthy, flexible, abundant, not with chronic pain, and then die quickly.
Right.
To get sick and then die within a week. Not get
that's
sick
not
and
what we
die
want.
within 20 years of misery. He's like, that's not a great life.
Yeah. We don't just want lifespan. We want health span. And it all really boils down, and this is the most beautiful part about this, and what I'm really hoping to impress upon culture, because when we tend to think of food, we tend to think of it in relationship. In our culture, we think of diet in relationship to weight. It's just like what's connected. When in reality, food is one of the greatest, if not the greatest determinant of what every single cell and organ system in your body is doing at all times. And this is what I really want to get across is, of course, I'm going to give you the best information possible on the metabolism connection with food, but also how does food affect your cognitive performance? And it's shocking when you find this data out, how deeply food impacts your levels of empathy and your ability to connect with other people.
What are the-
break that down as well.
What are the foods that cultivate more empathy and compassion? And what are the
But before
foods?
we
Yes.
get to that,
Yeah.
the fat storage, there was one more.
Were you talking about brown fat?
Yeah, brown fat.
And there was another fat.
Yeah, so
With
there's
that.
one other fat. And so brown adipose tissue is very dense in mitochondria, right? So these energy power plants, that's why it's brown. Babies have a lot of brown fat. It's kind of an evolutionary adaptation advantage to prevent hypothermia, just to
Keep them
basically
warm.
keep thermogenesis going. As you become an adult, you have a lot less brown adipose tissue. It's mostly located like around your collarbones, your shoulder blades, down your spine. And brown adipose tissue is remarkable in that it's really correlated. If you have enough brown adipose tissue, which you can create more, and the mobilization and activity of it is correlated with having a better body composition. So this type of fat is burning fat for you, if you know what
Brown
to do.
fat.
Yeah. All right, so we got 3 storage fats, and then we've got 2 other types of fat.
And that's body fat that burns fat.
Yes, and so this other one, and this is one a lot of folks might not know a lot about yet, is beige fat.
Is this the 5th type of fat?
Yeah, so this is beige fat.
Beige fat.
And so beige fat is really, really remarkable in that it can actually become brown fat or white fat. All right? Based on your lifestyle inputs and your nutrition can determine whether it's going to be turning into a fat storing type of fat or a fat burning type of fat. And the browning of this fat, one of the things, and I'll just throw this out there for folks since you asked about a specific food, when we go through so many different, but I'm going to throw one out that might sound a little bit crazy, a little controversial, is coffee. Coffee has been found to encourage your beige fat cells to become brown fat cells. And in fact, one of the studies that I cited in Eat Smarter found they actually used fMRI, and they looked at what was happening in the body when somebody drank coffee, and they saw the brown fat areas of the body actually light up, signaling increased thermogenesis. And one of the studies found that there's about a 3 to 11% increase in metabolic rate from having caffeine. Now, there's a U-shaped curve of benefits, right?
Right.
Some is good. Once we get to a certain place, we can mess ourselves up.
Yeah.
And also we get in the conversation of what is that coffee coming along with, right? Is it coffee, or are you consuming coffee with
donuts and crap?
And like, these coffee creamers with all these synthetic chemicals.
That is not good.
And even the coffee itself, are you getting a piping hot cup of coffee with pesticides and herbicides and rodenticides and these toxicants that damage these hormones related to fat loss and fat storage and create kind of dysbiosis in the gut? So there's a big conversation there, and we dive into all these pieces to see like there's so many wonderful things that we have access to, but in our culture, we've been a little bit led astray. And it's not that coffee is inherently good or bad. It's been utilized by humans for centuries, but it's the quality and how you're going about it that can make all the difference.
And the quantity probably, and yeah.
Yeah, and so just going back to your original question, when we're targeting that, the belly fat specifically, and this is something that is not talked about enough. It's really about encouraging and optimizing the hormones related to fat storage and fat burning, right? And this gets into the conversation of calories, because we tend to be very calorie focused as far as if we're trying to lose weight or we're trying to lose belly fat. And it's not that calories don't matter. I want to make that clear. I want to preface with this. But when I was in my nutritional science class in college, the king, the monarch, the warden of diet is calories. And I say warden intentionally because it gets into this kind of prisoner mentality.
Yeah.
And diets are really revolving around this. And I'm always asking this question, and I'm so grateful that I've kind of hardwired myself to do this. Where did it come from? Where the hell did this idea start? And so I went back and examined the entire history of calories. And it actually, for me, it's just like when we find like Egyptian pyramids, like they didn't have any shit about calories.
Right.
Nobody was even thinking about it or looking for it, even when it was discovered. And it wasn't discovered and used for nutrition. It was discovered and utilized initially in physics and engineering. And and this was in 1800s. And then it made its transition into nutrition thanks to a guy named Wilbur Atwater. But he's just kind of a little side note as well. And I go back and talk about all the people involved, but this is what changed America. This is what changed the world, really, was a physician. She's a pioneer for sure. Her name was Dr. Lulu Hunt Peters. And she's the one who popularized the term calorie. And she sold, and this was back in the early 1900s, she created a nutrition book, a diet book, and it sold 2 million copies back then, which is basically everybody and their mother had this book.
Right.
All right. Now,
what was it called?
This was Diet and Health and the Key to Calories, something like that, the Key to Calories. But I went back and read these old fangled writings. There's like a lot of pieces of it online. And this began the indoctrination of our culture in starting to look at food in terms of numbers. It's no longer this dynamic, multifaceted entity that affects all of our hormones and neurotransmitters and organ systems. Now it's numbers. And she specifically said, we will no longer call a slice of bread a slice of bread. You won't say one slice of bread, you'll say 100 calories of bread. You will no longer say a slice of pie, you say 350 calories of pie. And so we stopped looking at food as food. We started this evolution and started looking at it as numbers. And she asserted that a woman of her height could eat whatever she wanted as long as she maintained 1,200 calorie intake. And now let me also make this clear. Dr. Lulu Hunt Peters battled with her weight for her lifetime, all right? And it's that term of like, teach what you want to learn kind of thing. Now, this is also crucial. And some people, this might tug at their heartstrings a little bit. This was also the beginning of this indoctrination, associating food with character, associating food with morality. And so she basically asserted that it's a character defect if you're not able to manage your weight. There's something wrong with you. And started to use terms like sin and punishment in relationship to food. And this was also during the time of like World War I, so food rationing was a big thing happening. Right. And she said, one of her quotes I put in the book, and I'm paraphrasing that, for every pang of hunger you feel, you should have a double joy knowing that you're saving the hunger pangs in a starving child or, you know, with soldiers and what. So she's basically saying this was also a massive change in our perception that hunger is related to weight loss. If you're hungry, you're doing it right. And this started to really change the psychology of dieting, right? And so calories began to become the king and the big focus. Now, I want to say this, calories matter for sure. It's a measurement of energy in food, just like a meter is a measure of energy in distance. But that meter is consistent. If we measure this room consistently, it's going to be the same meters.
Same distance.
However, calories
are different.
Completely ignore, when you're talking about a measurement of energy, it ignores the complexity of human digestion and human hormones and neurotransmitters and cellular function. It's going to be different every day, the calories that you consume and what effects it has on your body.
Because our hormones are changing, our bodies are changing, our timelines are changing. What we used to eat when we were 12 may not affect us now when we're 40 or 50.
Exactly. Let alone you versus another person. And this is where we get in these situations where a diet works for one person, but it doesn't work for someone else. And I'm sick of it, man.
Wow.
Because people keep thinking there's something wrong with them, and they're not getting these very fundamental principles.
If you're looking for more greatness in your life, make sure to check out this video right here. And also check out our free PDF, The 3 Secrets to Unlock the Power of Your Mind to help you change your life. Download it right here.
By far, the biggest cause is food, by far. And it affects, I mean, what's amazing is it's not just like a little bit.